Hello, everyone. I'm Cho, and I'm 16 years old. Are you afraid of people on the street? Someone will say, dear, if you are afraid of everyone, you will stop going out on the street. And my answer is, watch this video to the end and find out how one trip with a stranger in an elevator ended for me. I've lived in Koreatown all of my life. Do not think that this is some kind of a ghetto. People of all various nationalities also live there. It's just that in our city, all South Koreans, starting with those who came many generations ago, live in the same area. This often leads to problems, but as for me, I absolutely like this state of things. Once, I went into a dark entrance with a white guy, and he started harassing me, and I was little. I've been told to be careful. I started yelling for help. In other places, no one would have helped me at all, but not here. My neighbors heard me and did not let the scoundrel get away with it. I loved all these people even more, but because of this incident, I became terribly nervous and afraid. Now imagine what happened to me when a strange white guy got into the same elevator with me. Oh my God, what terrible eyes he had. And his smile. Damn, this smile was almost like Joker's. He also moved in a strange way. I couldn't figure out what it was, but his movements made me tense for some reason. Then the elevator stopped. The lights went out, the movement stopped, and I was ready to scream. Have you ever felt trapped? I was locked in the most literal sense. And the devil knows with whom. This is embarrassing, huh? The guy asked. Don't be afraid of me. This, of course, was very reassuring. I began furiously to press the call button. A woman answered me and said that the workers would be here in 15 minutes. 15 minutes? He could kill me in that time. Well, I thought, okay, maybe I'll get lucky. I took out my phone to light it up, turned on the flashlight, and he was standing right next to me. I screamed, only then did he recoil. We went silent for a while, and then he said, you smell nice. Was that normal? I sidled to the door so that I could be the first to get out as soon as it was opened. And he was still smiling and staring at where I'd been standing. And then the elevator jerked. My heart just leapt into my throat, and I dropped my phone. I started to search on the floor and hear the voice of my maniac. Have you lost this? I stood up and demanded that he give the phone back. And I held out my hand, and in the second one, I clutched the keys in my pocket, almost ready to hit. He gave me the phone, but it didn't turn on. No more light. I started to breathe as if I was about to give birth. And he was at it again. What, you don't like the dark? He said. I like it. I'm more used to it. And he laughed, damn it. And then I felt a hand on my arm. How did he realize where I was standing? I couldn't see further than my own nose. By breathing? By smell? And then he muttered, don't be afraid. I'm with you. Damn, I'm afraid of you, maniac. Here, he brought his face close to mine and exhaled. Or maybe you and me. And then the door opened. I shoved him away and ran as fast as I could. I only turned around once to see him hanging around on the landing with that weird smile of his, arms outstretched like a zombie as if sniffling. Rough. I told my father right away, and he took it very seriously. Did a strange guy come up to you? Call me immediately if he shows up again, he said. I swore to my dad, but I really might not even have done it. I met this weirdo at the weekend when the whole family went for a walk in the alley. He was just walking around with that creepy smile, and I recognized him right away. Look, there he is. That one, my father asked, and was about to move toward him with clear intentions. And my mother stopped him. Cho, don't you see? He's blind. Dad and I took a closer look at the guy. In fact, the walking stick, which I took to be just a stylish accessory, was guiding his way, and he followed it carefully. Then I understood and was ashamed. I went crazy already, got scared of a blind boy. Well, he spoke strangely, but he didn't do anything wrong to me. Ugh, this was awkward. Have you ever accused a perfectly innocent person of something? After this, you really don't want to meet face to face. The next time I ran into him in the elevator was just 2 days later. I didn't think his smile was creepy anymore. Well, a little bit. We were silent for a moment, and then he said, "I recognize you by your perfume." I blushed and mumbled that I was sorry, that I had run away, that I was afraid of elevators and strangers in elevators. He offered to fix it with a walk. I agreed. During our conversation, I learned a lot about him. His name was James, and he inherited the apartment in our house from his uncle. James' parents died, and he now lived with his aunts, who were technically his guardians. I remembered the people on the 5th floor. Yes, dear Uncle Pon had recently been buried, and there were 3 angry women left behind: his wife, sister, and a mother. Terribly unpleasant ladies. I always say exactly what I think, but James wasn't offended. He said he couldn't stand them either and had just started going out without them, whereas they forbade him anything at all, including looking for a job. James and I met for another walk, and then another, and more. One day, I ran into one of his aunts in the elevator. Word for word, I told her that James was not a child to be so patronized and that she and her relatives should give him some freedom. What did she say? A big, fat, racist profanity. I didn't say anything to this disgusting woman, but I was determined that James should be saved from this terrible family. So I called him in the evening when he was usually at home and barely managed to persuade him to go for a walk without his aunts knowing. He was very nervous and worried that they would be angry, but I didn't listen to him. I took him to the Clover Honey, my favorite place in town. Technically, it was a bar, but there was a free stage, almost always few people, and musical instruments were freely available. I helped James play the marimba for the first time, the maracas, and I knocked on the jango myself. James was so happy. He said that he had wanted to buy a piano, but at first his family had no money, and then, after his uncle died, his aunts wouldn't let him use his inheritance. What? I was terribly surprised by what James said to me. And he went on. Yes, he was the heir to this money, and he was 18 years old, but his aunts were technically guardians of the invalid, and therefore they were responsible for his spending. So he didn't go to bars because he couldn't pay for himself. I did not waste time and turned to a neighbor who worked as a lawyer. We prefer to solve everything through friends, you know. I explained the situation to her, and she asked me to introduce her to James so that she could look at all his documents. They were stored in his aunt's closets, and there was no easy way to get there. So I went to James's house, made a scene, and distracted these crazy, noisy women while James grabbed all the documents he could get. I was forbidden to enter the house at all, but this did not bother me at all. I was glad that our little ruse had succeeded. A neighbor told us that if James could prove his independence, then he would not need any guardians at all. James filed a lawsuit, and our neighbors started representing him. And a few weeks later, I was called to court. It turned out that his aunts blamed everything on me, saying that I slept with their boy, where? In the elevator? Made a baby, and now I wanted my bastard to inherit everything by tricking a poor invalid. I went to the gynecologist, and he confirmed that I was a virgin. I wouldn't let those scumbags open their mouths at me. The trial was successful. James was given the right to manage his own money. He has moved to another apartment on the ground floor, so he doesn't have to use the elevator. But we still see each other, walk down the alley, and play the marimba at the Clover Honey. What would you do if you were stuck in an elevator with a creepy stranger? Or maybe you're the creepy stranger that people can get stuck with? Tell us in the comments and subscribe to our channel.
We ran forward as fast as we could, but we must not stop. The cannibals have almost caught up with us. The wall that separated the city from the rest of the island was a kilometer away. We have to make it at any cost. Sam and I are journalists, and we came here to do a story about the cannibal city. I was sure it was just a rumor, but now the crowd of savages was almost upon us. In desperation, I turned to the side. There was an abandoned shopping center. Sam followed, still holding the camera. I looked around the room frantically. There was no point in running to the shops. There were no glasses in the windows for a long time, and suddenly I saw an elevator. We ran to it and I pressed the button. The elevator still wasn't moving. I looked around and was horrified to see that the mall had been invaded by a crowd. And then the elevator doors creaked open. Sam and I jumped in, and I pressed the close button. The doors were closing so slowly, and the cannibals were already running towards us. This was the end. I already started going over the images of my life. And why did we just come here? I always wanted to be a well-known journalist, and went head over heels. So when I heard about the Cannibal Island scandal, I realized this was my chance to become famous. The government had enclosed the captured city with a wall, and no one dared to enter it. And I decided. And my obnoxious colleague Sam stuck with me. That's how we ended up in this hellish place. I was startled out of my reverie by one of the savages grabbing my leg. I felt a piercing pain from the fingernails and screamed, but with the last of my strength, I kicked him with my other foot. How painful! He jumped back as the elevator doors finally slammed shut. We made it, Sam. He kicked the button board with all his might, and the elevator blinked. Now the doors couldn't be opened. They were jammed, and we could get out through the hatch into the shaft. We're safe, Sam said. But the beasts continued to pound on the door anyway, and every time they hit the elevator, I flinched. I looked at Sam, and he suddenly turned the camera to my leg. What? I looked down, my head spinning. The whole leg was torn and covered in deep marks. I immediately remembered the long, dirty fingernails of the cannibal that had clung to me, and my heart sank. Before that, probably because of fear, I didn't even feel pain. But now my leg felt like it was burning. Sam took a close-up of it. I almost started to cry, but then Sam hugged me, and he said that the leg would heal up, and we would definitely survive, and there was no way he was going to leave me. I was ashamed for a second, because I thought Sam was a cold, calculating egotist. And now he took care of me. He even tore off the sleeve of his shirt and bandaged my wound. He recorded everything on the camera, and the cannibals continued to break into the door. I didn't know what to do. We couldn't get out while these beasts were watching us, and we couldn't stay here forever either. But there were no other options. We opened their backpacks, stew, water, bars, if anything that was enough for 2 days. And I checked my phone, but of course there was no connection. Sam filmed my every action. The banging on the door only got worse. The cannibals seemed to be losing their temper. I started to panic. Sam suddenly said that when we got out, we'd get fame in the Best Reporter award. After all, we were the first to show unique footage from the island of cannibals. His words calmed me down a little. Yes, I will be the best. I'll surpass everyone who said I wasn't amount to anything. All I had to do was get out. The cannibals were banging harder. I panicked again, so did Sam. We woke up almost in sync. What? Had we fallen asleep? How long did we sleep? Due to stress and fatigue, we just passed out. I could hardly remember what happened before. We listened. There was no more pounding on the door. Had they gone? But before I could be happy, I brushed against my bad leg and felt a sharp pain. My leg was already swollen. Almost crying, I showed Sam my leg, and it only made me feel worse. Sam just turned on the camera and made a stupid joke that I would soon turn into a cannibal. Perfect timing. I urgently needed antibiotics, but there was no first aid kit in my backpack for some reason. Maybe I dropped it during the chase. The only way out was to look for medicines in the shopping center. I knew that in a few hours, I wouldn't be able to stand on my feet. Sam agreed to come with me, but only if I caught it on a GoPro camera. That's not what I needed to think about right now, but I agreed. He put the GoPro on my head, and we listened. Everything was quiet. Sam carefully opened the hatch of the elevator. At the thought that we might run into the cannibals, the blood froze in my veins. Sam helped me out, and soon we were climbing out through the shaft. It was light outside, so we were out all night. I looked around and immediately noticed the sign. Pharmacy! Very close! But before I could take a step, a savage came around the corner and ran towards me, making terrible noises. Sam, back up! He immediately jumped into the shaft and crawled into the elevator. I followed him, and as soon as we had closed the hatch, the savage began to break into it. My heart was pounding and my leg was aching. I began to think that I had an infection. The only way to escape was to get the medicine. I said this to Sam, but he mumbled that he had hit himself hard when he fell into the elevator and now he couldn't walk. Strange, just a minute ago, everything was fine, but I knew that if I didn't get the antibiotic now, I'd be finished. The savage continued to pound on the elevator's hatch. Damn, I need to distract him somehow. I rummaged in my bag and found hairspray. I didn't think it would help me, but I felt the lighter in my pocket, and it hit me. I hope it works. I opened the hatch abruptly. The savage was already hissing and ready to attack. I immediately put the lighter under the spray. A flash of fire burned the cannibal, and he fell screaming into the shaft. Got it! I immediately got out and rushed to the pharmacy alone. When I got there, I immediately hid behind a shelf. I think it worked. No one chased me. There were still some drugs left on the shelves. I noticed the first aid kit on the floor and immediately grabbed it. At that moment, I looked out the window and saw our car. An emergency exit led directly to it from the pharmacy. If we get through the savages, we can get out of here. I just needed to get to Sam. I turned around and was stunned with horror. Right in front of me was a cannibal. I was so excited about the emergency exit that I didn't even hear him approach me. He was a centimeter away from me. But then I grabbed a bottle and hit him on the head. The beast twisted in pain, and I rushed to Sam. I got there quickly. Sam was there, and I breathed a sigh of relief. But then a hand reached out from above. The cannibal. God, I didn't close the hatch. I dropped my backpack and immediately slammed it shut, and tried to hold on with all my strength. But the savage was stronger. Sam, help me. But he was in no hurry. My hands were getting weaker by the second, and I couldn't stand it and let go of the lid. At that moment, the savage, who continued to pull it on himself, fell into the shaft. That was so close. I looked at Sam reproachfully. Why did he help me? But all Sam said was that he couldn't leave the camera, and that he acted that he had already examined the first aid kit, but it turned out that there were only empty bottles in it. Did I take the wrong box? There was another banging on the elevator door, and I was desperate. Tears welled up in my eyes. But Sam suddenly said I was so brave. Together, we would succeed. Because I was the same as him. I was ready to do anything for the sake of a dream. His words cheered me up a little, and I quickly told Sam about the emergency exit at the pharmacy, and he was also very happy. We would get out of there soon. We decided to wait until nightfall, until the cannibals got tired of breaking through and left. To calm down, we told each other stories. Sam was a good conversationalist. However, he filmed on camera even this. But soon the battery was dead, and I hid it in my backpack. Right now, the main thing was to get out of there alive, and we already had a lot of shots. At some point, Sam shushed me. I think it's time. We quickly climbed out through the shaft. My heart was pounding. Sam, hush! Suddenly, shards of glass crunched loudly under my feet. Oh no, they would wake up. Sam and I looked at each other, but the savages were nowhere to be seen. That was close. We tiptoed to the exit, and I tried not to breathe, so as not to make any unnecessary sounds. And then we were out on the street, running as fast as we could to the car. But suddenly, Sam stumbled. As I helped him to his feet, a bottle of antibiotics fell out of his pocket. Stop, but you said the first aid kit was empty. Then Sam's face twisted into a grin. What's happening? He said he just didn't want to give up to me. What? Are you kidding? I might die. But Sam said that was what he wanted. After all, then all the glory would go to him, and I would remain a loser, a missing person, and he wouldn't have to push me into the hands of cannibals. The audience would only see how he tried to help me and bandage my wounds. I was taken aback, not believing his words, but then Sam abruptly snatched the backpack with the camera from me and ran to the car. I quickly picked up the bottle of antibiotics, swallowed the pill as I went, and ran after him. Oh no, Sam! And then he started shouting loudly. I realized with horror that he was waking up the savages. There were a lot of them in the dark and they woke up. Sam climbed into the car, and I ran over and tried to handle, but it wouldn't budge. That bastard locked the doors. I was about to be torn to pieces. At that moment, he started the engine. No, it can't end like this. I ran after the cars as fast as I could, and at the last moment, I clung to the trunk. Got it! I struggled to get on top of it, but Sam started maneuvering to throw me off. What are you doing? I held on as best as I could. A pack of cannibals was running behind the car, and at any moment, I could fall right on top of them. But suddenly the car jerked violently. There was a pop, and it stopped. What's happening? I jumped off the trunk, and I realized that the tire had burst. I started to panic. I looked back and saw the savages. Furious, they were too close. Limping, I ran to the gate in the wall. Come on, there's not much left. And when I was almost there, it hit me. Where was Sam anyway? I turned and saw that he had got out of the car and was barely dragging himself, and the savages were catching up with him. I wanted so badly to see Sam torn apart after his betrayal. He was ready to give me up for some shots. But then something inside me quivered. It wasn't long ago that I was ready to go head over heels for Fame 2. I suddenly realized that people could be as good as savages. But no, I'm human. I made an effort and quickly returned to Sam. I took his arm and pulled him along. And all I could think was, if I had really spent my entire life neglecting others for my own purposes, just like Sam. There were only a couple of meters left, and here it was, the exit. We got out on last breath, and I managed to slam the gate shut. At the same moment, the cannibals began to drum wildly on it. Tears welled up in my eyes. We are saved. Is it really over? We went through so much for these shots. But Sam suddenly interrupted me and calmly said that the camera was left in the car. Couldn't believe it. Sam grinned enigmatically. Did you like the video? Then subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you. He was supposed to show up around 12. I was already waiting for him at the elevators, dressed as a cleaner. Finally, Chris appeared at the entrance. Immediately, I put the mop in the cart and quickly followed him. Chris Sparks was a controversial photographer, and he dug up dirt on my boyfriend Ben. I had to steal the flash drive for the pictures right out of his pocket. I was almost at his side when the big guard called out to me. Stop! I pretended not to hear and quickened my pace. But the guard grabbed me by the elbow and abruptly blurted out, I told you to wipe it here. I tried to pull away. I couldn't let Chris go, but the guard made it clear that it was pointless to argue. I grabbed him up and quickly wiped away the stain. The guard turned away, pleased with himself, and I saw Chris step inside the elevator. The doors were slowly closing behind him. Damn, I'm missing him. Then I kicked the cart as hard as I could. It slammed the elevator and immediately blocked the doors. The noise made everyone in the hall stare at me. Oh, I'm so clumsy. Sorry. I quickly pushed the cart into the elevator and pressed the button for the top floor. I only had 15 seconds to get the dirt from Sparks. The doors closed. The game began. The stakes were high. Tomorrow, my boyfriend Ben was going to participate in the final stage of the mayoral election, for which he had been preparing for a whole year, and I helped him. If Chris handed over the flash drive with the dirt in the hands of journalists, Ben would lose. And here I was, disguised as a cleaning lady, standing in the elevator next to Chris. I did everything according to plan. I took out the glass cleaner and began to wipe the mirror. Then I deliberately sprayed on some Chris's jacket. I'm sorry, I'm so clumsy. The jacket needs to be washed urgently, otherwise the liquid will corrode the wool. Before Chris knew it, I'd already taken off his jacket and was ostensibly scrubbing at the stain. In fact, I definitely reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. We knew that Chris carried important things there. But there was nothing inside. Where was the flash drive? At the moment, Chris thanked me, took his jacket and turned to the mirror in the elevator to adjust it. Then I saw him put something small in his back pocket, so he was holding the flash drive in his hands all this time. I looked at the panel. We had almost reached the top floor. There wasn't much time left. So I took a couple of steps toward Chris. Sure, getting the flash drive out of his hands was a lot harder, but I had to try. I was standing right next to him. Suddenly, the light flickered. The cabin jerked and the elevator braked sharply. I swayed, got thrown off, and bumped my forehead lightly against the stupid cart. This was my chance. I pretended to hit myself hard and asked Chris to get me some water. He became nervous, turned to the cart, and started looking for the bottle. At this time, I reached into the back pocket of his pants and found the keychain, which apparently was attached to the flash drive. I grabbed it and pulled gently. That's it. Almost got it. Then Chris turned around. He was holding a bottle of water. I jerked my hand away and pretended I wasn't thinking straight. The damn flash drive was still in his pocket. Chris said that he needed to call a doctor soon and immediately reached for the call button for the dispatcher. Not that. If the elevator went, I wouldn't have time to pick up the flash drive. I immediately grabbed Chris by the shirt, pulled him to me, and not knowing what else to do, tried to kiss him. I'm sorry, Ben, but this is all for you. As I reached out to kiss Chris, I reached into his pocket with a flash drive. A second later, I had the flash drive in my hand. Yes! But Chris pulled back so abruptly that he knocked the flash drive out of my hand. It hit the metal floor with a crash. I tried to push the flash drive under the cart with my foot, but Chris had already looked down and was clutching at the pocket of his pants. He said he had just dropped a very important item. I politely offered to help with the search, but Chris quickly saw the flash drive and put it back in his pants pocket. And then he looked me straight in the eye and said that even though his vision was -7, he immediately saw a striking resemblance between me and the mayor's girlfriend, Lila. And she also passionately hugged in public with her boyfriend, Ben. My heart sank with fear. Did he see through me? Trying not to show my excitement, I replied coldly that I had no idea who this Lila was. Chris said that he would love to tell such a beauty about politics, but now was not the time and place. But he was in a hurry to work. He reached for the call button again. No, you're not leaving here until I get the flash drive. I tried to kiss him again, but this time he politely pushed me away. Am I not good enough for you, mister? Chris said that unlike Ben Hayes, the controversial mayoral candidate, he didn't kiss girls he didn't know. What do you mean? Chris grimaced and reluctantly told me that Ben had been caught with a mulatto woman this weekend. He gave her flowers and they went somewhere holding hands. And his girlfriend Lila probably didn't know what he was doing. My heart sank in pain. No, Ben's not like that. He couldn't do this to me. I was at a loss, and Chris managed to press the button to call the dispatcher. Oh no. Chris said that we were stuck, and the speaker said that the elevator would go in a minute. There was no time to make a mistake, so I started counting down the seconds in my head. Chris suddenly took off his glasses and began to wipe them. Yes, -7. He couldn't see anything without his glasses. I pushed the cart hard and it hit Chris right on the elbow. The glasses fell out and flew somewhere on the floor. Damn. I'm sorry. That stupid cart had a broken wheel a long time ago. Chris looked at me with displeasure and began to search for his glasses. I finally managed to grab the keychain, pull the flash drive out of his pocket, and clench it tightly in my fist. It worked! Chris wanted to let me go first out of the elevator, but I told him I was on the wrong floor and went back down. As soon as I left the building, I hailed a taxi. Within 15 minutes, I was at Ben's headquarters. Ben! I got the damn flash drive! We're safe. He grabbed it greedily from my hand and hugged me so tightly for the first time in his life. But after a couple of minutes, he looked back at his smartphone and said he had a lot to do. A lump of resentment rose in my throat. Can't you see I miss you, Ben? But he said he had an important meeting scheduled for the evening with a female government politician. Congresswoman Ben. Then I remembered what Chris had said about Ben having someone else. Ben, what's on this flash drive? You still haven't told me what dirt they found. He hesitated in a strange way and began to mumble that there were documents and I would not understand anything in them. I realized he'd been lying to me all along. I snatched the flash drive out of Ben's hand and headed for the nearest laptop. Ben tried to stop me, but I pinned his foot down with all my strength. Let's see what you're hiding from me, my love. Ben ran over to me, but I had already opened the flash drive on the laptop. But instead of documents or photos of Ben's, there were only pictures of Chris in a dinosaur costume. What the hell? In each photo, Chris held a sign with a letter on it. I read everything and they lined up in the phrase, "Don't trust anyone." At the same time, our press secretary called me and asked me to open the news immediately. Ben's phone was ringing too. I immediately opened the news portal and browser. On the front page, my love was hugging a mulatto woman in a restaurant. At the bottom of the article was the postscript. The photos arrived at the publishing house around 7 a.m. So Chris passed on the dirt before we met in the elevator. Ben started to tell me that this was a Photoshop, that I did not understand. And indeed, I had myself to blame. I slapped him hard and left. I was choking with resentment and pain. What a fool I was. Ben didn't love me. I was just a convenient beauty who fulfilled all his whims. Then I got a text from Chris. He asked me out on a date. Since I was free now, how did he get my number? I didn't want to know though, after today. All I wanted to do was get drunk. I'll meet you at the bar, Chris. I'll tell you a lot more about Ben and his dirty tricks.